emerged in discussions over AI pedagogy at the JALTCALL conference last July, particularly those concerning AI's role in writing instruction. Rather than offering a report on individual presentations at the conference, I would like to take those conversations as a starting point for a broader pedagogical reflection. So in this regard, I will be talking for about 25 to 30 minutes, and then we can open it up for discussions. And one thing that I find interesting is that the questions that surfaced at the conference last July about authorship, student agency, assessment, they provide a productive framework for examining a set of AI-mediated teaching practices that I, along with two other colleagues in the ALES and ALESA program, have developed and implemented over the past year. And these practices function as targeted pedagogical interventions designed to respond thoughtfully to the realities of AI in the classroom. Now, one thing that I'd like to stress is that our aim in designing these pedagogical interventions has not been to encourage its use, nor simply to police it, but to design pedagogy that engages constructively and deliberately with its presence. So to better understand the AI-related themes that we will be discussing today, let's first take a look at how our students here at the ALESA program are engaging with AI tools. I'd like to share the results of a survey that we conducted, that the AI and Teaching Practices Committee conducted at the start of this past year. And this survey targeted first-year students enrolled in academic writing courses. And the results, which are summarized in these two pie charts, show that by the beginning of their second semester at the university, the vast majority of students had already used AI tools. And we can reasonably expect future cohorts to arrive at the university with even greater familiarity and skill in the use of AI tools. After all, some high schools in Tokyo and other cities have already begun integrating generative AI tools into language learning instruction. So in future years, we expect a far higher percentage of students that are proficient in the use of AI when they enter the university. And just to give you an example here of how these students actually use AI tools for their language learning, and this was, if you take a look at the screen at this graph, these are the results based on a survey that we conducted at the beginning of the spring semester in 2025. And as you can see, most of them, 76% of them are proficient or have been using ChatGPT. There's been DeepL and Google Translate as well. We also conducted this survey in autumn 2025, in other words, in the beginning of last semester, and there was an increase from 76 to 87% in the use of ChatGPT. And also there was a major increase in the use of other Gen AI tools, such as Gemini. So for instance, Gemini, its use among students in their second semester at the University of Tokyo went from 17% to 67%. So that was really a major increase. So within this context in mind, I'd like to broaden the lens and connect our local findings to the wider academic conversation that I had the opportunity to participate in at the JALTCALL conference last July. And during the conference, there were several themes that emerged. And I'm not going to be discussing all of them, of course, but I've identified 5 themes, and several of these themes are interrelated. And together, the studies that were presented at the conference, they highlighted shared challenges, common concerns, and emerging pedagogical strategies related to the integration of AI tools in academic writing instruction, especially in first-year academic writing instruction. So the first theme that several papers discussed was the use of AI-assisted essay writing. And these papers highlighted the potential of such tools, such as ChatGPT, to support learners during revision, particularly in reducing grammatical and mechanical errors in early drafts. Analyses of learner-AI interactions, revised drafts, as well as student reflections showed that AI feedback was often taken up at the sentence level, resulting in cleaner and more fluent texts. However, these studies also showed that learners frequently struggled to apply feedback that required rhetorical judgment, such as refining argumentation or aligning claims with local academic conventions. So the findings that were presented by these researchers suggested that AI feedback alone did not automatically promote higher order revision and could instead reinforce surface level editing unless learners were explicitly supported in evaluating and contextualizing AI suggestions. Another problem, which was not discussed by the presenters, but this is something that I noticed in my research on AI, is that there are certain AI tools, for instance, ChatGPT, when you ask them to refine or improve the writing and correct grammatical mistakes, at times these tools, they end up adding additional ideas and analysis that weren't there in the first place. So they do more than just add or revise and improve the writing. So this is also another issue and concern that I've been thinking a lot about in this regard. So another key theme that came up during the conference concerned the pedagogical consequences of when AI should be introduced in the writing process. So action research that was presented at the conference compared AI first and AI last approaches. And these studies demonstrated that early AI use often shaped students' organizational structures and narrowed the range of ideas explored, particularly for lower proficiency writers. In contrast, these studies showed that using AI after drafting tended to support revision, language refinement, and reflection on existing content while preserving a stronger sense of authorship. So these findings, and I think this is key here for us to think about, underscored that decisions about sequencing influenced originality, learner agency, and the extent to which students engaged in meaningful problem solving during writing tasks and during the writing process. Several presentations also reframed AI use as a matter of literacy and power rather than technical proficiency. So here you're starting to see this idea of critical engagement and a deeper discussion on student agency. So Gen AI literacy initiatives emphasized helping students understand not only the use of AI tools, but also when and why their use was appropriate, ethical, and transparent. Complementing this, research grounded in critical digital literacy revealed that students actively negotiated trust, authority, and authorship in their interactions with AI. Learners critically assessed AI outputs, accepted or rejected suggestions, and reflected on underlying ideologies. Now, these findings positioned AI use as a socially situated practice that required critical awareness, not just operational skill. And this is something that many instructors kind of don't take into consideration. So one thing to keep in mind is, and this discussion was really interesting, is this interplay between user and the tool. That tech is never neutral, but must be critically engaged with so far that the user can retain authority and agency. So it is important to encourage students to cross-check the information that they receive from the LLM. And Tied into this discussion, into this theme, were also concerns about learner voice and authorship. One presentation framed this issue through two contrasting scenarios. In one, over-reliance on AI led to stylistic homogenization, with student writing increasingly shaped by standardized language. In the other scenario, guided AI use supported accuracy and clarity while allowing writers to retain control over meaning and stance. Importantly, voice was conceptualized not as a physical or as a fixed personal trait, but as a developmental construct shaped through instructional choices and feedback. So one of the presentations provided a concrete classroom example to illustrate this distinction. In one activity, students first submitted an independently written paragraph, then revised it using AI suggestions, and finally reflected on which AI outputs they accepted or rejected, and also provided reasons for why they accepted or rejected these AI outputs. Analysis showed that students who were prompted to justify their decisions retained more individualized phrasing and a clearer stance as the author, while those without reflected scaffolding often adopted AI-generated wording wholesale without critically thinking about it. So this example underscores the role of teacher mediation in helping students use AI as a linguistic resource rather than a substitute for their own voice. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about motivation and anxiety, because this is a theme that constantly came up in the presentations at the JALT conference. And so several studies presented at the conference examined the affective dimensions of AI use, particularly motivation and foreign language anxiety. Research combining multimodal pre-writing tasks with ChatGPT reported increased engagement and enjoyment, with students expressing greater willingness to begin writing tasks. Similarly, students using ChatGPT as a conversational partner outside the classroom showed reduced anxiety during AI interventions and more positive attitudes towards AI-assisted practice. However, and this is what I thought was really interesting, these effective benefits did not consistently translate into increased classroom confidence or participation. This suggests that while AI could create supportive, low-stakes environments for practice, effective gains alone were not sufficient without pedagogical integration that connected AI use to classroom goals. So, taken together, the studies that were presented at the JALTCALL conference highlighted the complexity of integrating AI into writing instructions. What I liked about it was that it deepened the conversation about AI-mediated learning, going far beyond the cheating debate that generally is, the common theme during our faculty meetings. So now in the second part, I want to compare these research-informed insights with actual approaches that we have taken in our first-year writing courses here in the Alessa program at the University of Tokyo. So rather than offering solutions, I would like to raise certain points that invite critical reflection on future directions for AI in writing pedagogy, especially in first-year academic writing. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the AI pedagogical interventions that I, along with two other colleagues, have been implementing in our classrooms. So to better understand how we can respond to AI's presence in the classroom and also among students, we designed AI-mediated pedagogical interventions aimed at strengthening research competency, information literacy, and self-efficacy. So one thing that we decided we didn't want to do is we didn't want to adopt AI wholesale in our courses. We did not allow students, for instance, to use AI for writing tasks, but instead we focused on certain particular tasks, especially when it came to research as well as revision, in which these pedagogical interventions would be able to strengthen their skills and competency. So by restricting AI to clearly defined research tasks, embedding it within structured pedagogy and framing it as mediated support rather than serving as a substitute for students' own analytical and evaluative processes, our interventions were designed to scaffold autonomous engagement with research tasks, fostering critical decision-making, reflective judgment, and most importantly, a sense of agency and ownership over their academic work. In addition, we sought to teach students how to use different large language models, or LLMs, such as ChatGPT, ScholarGPT, and Perplexity for academic research. And this is important because each LLM has distinct capabilities, strengths, and limitations in generating information, in identifying sources, and in summarizing content. And this is something that one thing that I noticed at the JALT conference was that most of the studies used ChatGPT. So ChatGPT was kind of like the default LLM that was used in these pedagogical interventions. What we wanted to do is, when we came up with these interventions here at the University of Tokyo, we wanted to focus, we didn't want students to become overly familiarized with one particular product. We wanted to have them try different LLMs to understand the potential limitations of each AI tool. And in fact, research has shown that understanding these differences between LLMs helps students develop critical evaluation skills, improve information literacy, and better calibrate their self-efficacy when using AI-assisted research tools. Research competency, what we did was we treated research competency and information literacy as integrated practices, particularly in relation to information-seeking behavior, where searching is understood as a learning process rather than simply retrieval. And along these research constructs that we employed in our intervention, in our pedagogical interventions, we also wanted, we also explicitly foregrounded self-efficacy, defined as a learner's belief in their ability to successfully perform a task. And this is especially relevant in first-year English for academic purposes contexts, where students often enter with limited research experience and low confidence, particularly when working in a foreign language such as English. So this design rationale is also why AI was used deliberately and that we restricted it to specific tasks such as source discovery and early stage research planning. Limiting AI in this way allowed us to scaffold engagement with research tasks, support confidence building, and also maintain student responsibility and agency. So now that I outlined the theoretical rationale behind our design and why we focused on certain tasks such as research competency, information literacy, and also why we focused on self-efficacy, the next step was to translate these principles into concrete classroom practices. So what did this actually look in action in the classroom? So what we did was, in practical terms, we wanted students to engage with AI early in the research process so that they could explore topics, locate sources, and see how AI could support but not replace their own thinking. Now, a central part of this approach is something that is called prompt engineering. And prompt engineering basically is a fancy term that is now being used all over the place, which basically refers to the practice of strategically designing queries to guide AI outputs in useful directions. Basically, what you're telling the LLM to do. And in the classroom, we framed prompt engineering as a three-step structure to provide students with clear prompt categories and scaffolding. And here we are actually drawing on the research by Vanden and Watson that emphasizes this idea of task, format, and context. And each step encourages students to think critically about what they want to accomplish, the type of output they need, and also the specific conditions or constraints that make the output relevant and accurate. So let me give you an example just to show you how this works. And this is actually the example that we used in one of our classes. So let's say a student is exploring protest movements in Asia, specifically Hong Kong. So they might start with a task like locate beginner-friendly sources on protest movements in Asia. So they type the task in Perplexity AI. Okay, then they get the results. And then they would add a format specification. Only peer-reviewed academic sources in sociology, political science, and communication. And then finally, they would add the context. Focus on the on the most recent findings, after 2019, in Hong Kong. And if, for instance, they receive only a limited number of studies, if the research is limited, they could actually include related contexts such as the Arab Spring. So this refinement actually helps students shape AI responses to produce usable information while prompting them to critically evaluate each output. So in our in-class exercises, after students have actually found the sources that they need, this then culminates in refined research questions, in having students refine their research questions. So for example, after engaging with Perplexity AI and refining their prompts, students might revise their research question to: how have social mobilization strategies during the Arab Spring and the umbrella movements in Hong Kong influence youth political engagement and recent protest movements in places like Hong Kong? So basically, based on their findings, they're able to start thinking about how they're going to refine their research question. Now, while AI tools like Perplexity can synthesize information quickly, students actually need guidance to critically evaluate the credibility, relevance, and scholarly rigor of the output that they receive. And we modeled verification and decision-making strategies to ensure that students understood that AI is a support, not a replacement for human judgment. And AI limitations can actually have teaching moments. For instance, Perplexity sometimes returns non-scholarly sources, such as Reddit posts or websites that are mixed with the academic articles that they provide. So rather than seeing this as a problem, we actually saw these moments and these situations as a way to prompt critical evaluation, helping students learn to distinguish, for instance, between primary and secondary sources. So students would receive the results of their, the output, this list of sources that Perplexity would provide them, and we would have students go over them and say, okay, which ones are the scholarly sources that you asked for, and which ones are not, which ones are Reddit posts, which ones are non-academic sources, and how can you use these non-academic sources and incorporate them into your research. So that was something that actually was very useful in the classroom. So And then for homework, we had students repeat the same task that they did in the classroom with Perplexity AI, but instead they used another LLM, Scholar GPT, which allowed them to compare outputs between LLMs and practice and further practice critical assessment skills, observing how different AI tools synthesize and prioritize information. Now, one of the things that I want to emphasize here, and this is really very important, and for some reason, very few presentations actually discuss this at the JALT conference, which was one of the things we did was we had students download and submit their AI chat history. So many AI tools, and this includes Perplexity, allow chat histories to be downloaded as PDFs. Having students submit these histories enabled us instructors to track student interactions with the LLMs, provide them with feedback, and evaluate how they refined their prompts. It also encouraged students to reflect on AI use, accountability, and student agency, as our students actively engage in shaping how AI informs their research rather than passively following their outputs. And it also allowed us to provide to see which students were actually following our instructions and which students were not. And by reflecting on their AI chat histories, students could better understand how to interact with these tools in a more critical and effective manner. So overall, combining teacher mediation, homework comparison of LLMs, and chat history submission reports, students were able to better understand research competency, information literacy, self-efficacy, and agency. Now, even though there were, now I would like to talk a little bit about some concerns and problems that emerged when we were conducting these AI interventions. And one of the things that we noticed, and this is special, and we noticed this not just when students were doing the activity, but also afterwards when we were conducting one-on-one interviews with students, is that while AI tools can help students locate sources quickly, there is the risk that students may not develop proficiency in traditional search strategies, for example, Boolean searching. If students rely primarily on AI-generated source lists rather than constructing their own database queries using operators such as and, or, and not, they might miss out on learning how to systematically refine, narrow, and control their searches. So in other words, while AI can accelerate information retrieval, it may also short-circuit the development of foundational research skills, such as learning how to conduct Boolean searching, which I believe is still more effective, at least in my field, than using AI tools. So this raises, in my view, an important pedagogical question. How do we integrate AI in ways that enhance research competency without undermining students' ability to conduct rigorous, independent database searches? Because one of the things that we did was we taught students how to search, conduct research, and find sources by using both University of Tokyo databases, and using these databases, students learned how to do Boolean searching, and then we taught them how to use AI tools such as Perplexity and Scholar GPT to also find sources. And when we were interviewing students at the end of the course and asking them which method they preferred, and most of them actually said, well, we preferred Perplexity and AI tools because it was kind of like having a conversation with them, and it was much easier to retrieve sources. The problem is that Boolean searching, and this is my personal opinion on this, is still incredibly important and far more effective. For instance, in my research, I still use Boolean searches, and I find far better materials for my research than when I use, for instance, Perplexity or other LLMs. So these are some concerns that emerged as we were doing the pedagogical intervention. But anyway, I've been speaking for 30 minutes now, so I would like to open it up for questions, concerns, debate among the audience members. So thank you very much.